शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्तिः 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 सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्तिः 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 यश्छन्दसा मृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया आस्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय ॐ शान्तिः 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 अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिवा कीर्तिः पृष्ठं गिरेरिवा ऊर्ध्वपवित्रो वाजिनीव स्वमृतमस्मि द्रविणगुंसवर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः इति त्रिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम् ॐ शान्तिः 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 पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः 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 आप्यायन्तु मम अङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रमथो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि सर्वं ब्रह्मोपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत् अनिराकरणमस्त्वनिराकरणं मे अस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्मास्ते मयि सन्तु ते मयि सन्तु ॐ शान्तिः 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 वाङ् मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविराविर्म एधि वेदस्य म आनीस्थः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासीः अनेनादितेन अहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्तिः 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 भद्रं नो अपि वातय मनः ॐ शान्तिः 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 भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्तिः 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 यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तगुंहदेवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये ॐ शान्तिः 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 श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vasishtam Shaktim Cha Tatputra Parasharam Cha Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindram Athasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Athasya Padmapadam Cha Hastamalakam Cha Shishyam Tam Totakam Vartikakaramanyana Asmadgurun Santato Manatosmi Om Vishwam Darpana Drishyamana Nagari Tulyam Nijantargatam Pashyannatmani Mayaya Bahirivodbhutam Yatha Nidraya Yat Sakshat Kurute Prabodha Samaye Swatmanamevadvayam Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namahitam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Bijasyantarivankuro Jagadidam Prang Nirvikalpam Punaha Maya Kalpita Desha Kala Kalana Vaichitrya Chitri Kritam Maya Viva Vijrambhayatyapi Maha Yogi Vayasvechaya Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaitam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Yasyaiva Sphuranam Sadatmakam Asatkalparthakam Bhasate Sakshat Tattvamasiti Veda Vachasa Yo Bodhayatyashritan Yat Sakshat Karanad Bhavenna Punaravrittirbhavambho Nidhau Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaitam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Nana Chidraghatodhara Sthita Mahadeepa Prabhabhaswaram Jnanam Yasya Tu Chakshuradhikarana Dvara Bahispandate Janami Tameva Bhantamanubhatye Tatsamastam Jagat Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Deham pranamapindriyanapi chalam buddhim cha shunyam viduhu Stri balanda jadopamastvahamiti Bhranta bhrisham vadinaha Maya shakti vilasa kalpita mahavyamoha samharine Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye. Okay, so what we will do today is to look at the Shankarabhasya on the fourth sutra. So let's recite all the four sutras. Athato Brahma Jigyasa Athato Brahma Jigyasa Janmadyasya Yataha Janmadyasya Yataha Shastrayonitvat Shastrayonitvat Tattu Samanvayat Tattu Samanvayat. So these first sutras are extraordinary because they cover some of the basic and important elements of Vedanta. So much so that each sutra itself is an adhikaranam. I was reviewing the last class just to see where we ended, and I made a mistake in saying that for the rest of the sutras, each sutra has many adhikaranams. That is not the correct way. There are many sutras with one adhikaranam. That's the way it should, just the opposite of that. So there are, from this point on, you don't have one sutra and one adhikaranam. Adhikaranam means a topic, but you will have several sutras with one. So one topic may involve more than one sutra. So that's a basic distinction between them. Anyway, the first four sutras are considered to be essential to understand. As you know, there is in Vedanta, in the serious study of Vedanta, there are three, what they call three main highways to approach the goal. They're called prasthanatraya. So the three goals are all the important Upanishads, even though the Upanishads are thousands, but we really take maybe a dozen Upanishads to study in our lifetime. So this is one prasthana. The second prasthana is Bhagavad Gita, because it is so highly regarded in terms of a complete guidebook for living. It has both the instructions for where to go and how to get there, especially for people who are not sannyasis. So that's the second prasthana. And then the Brahma Sutra is the third prasthana. This is considered to be that for students who really want to get to the bottom of it, you have to see what Vyasacharya has presented in terms of an overall analysis of all the Vedas in a very logical fashion, defensible fashion. And so that is what the Brahma Sutras are. And it covers the entire gamut of topics that we are faced with in understanding. Out of those, the four main topics are given in the four sutras, starting with Athato Brahma Jigyasa. So I think in another class or so, we will quickly revise the four sutras so that we can remember and reinforce the central themes of these four sutras. So we will do that. But for now, so far in following Swami Paramarthanandaji's method of explaining the four sutras, what we have done is to conceptually present the key aspects of the four sutras. And the first three sutras had rather simple Shankarabhasya that corresponded to those concepts, and we went over that. I think you've already seen that. In the fourth sutra, which we are going to do today, it's a very elaborate Shankarabhasya. Very elaborate and very long, and very difficult to analyze. So I may not go through the entire set of the Shankarabhasya for the fourth sutra, but we will take a beginning of it today and possibly go to the next class. I think may or may not be, I'll have to see. So we will cover just a portion of the Shankarabhasya of the fourth sutra, so after that, we will do a quick revision of all the four sutras in a conceptual manner. Then we will decide how many more sutras in a selected basis we will do. And if we take up a sutra on a selected basis, and I'm still looking at some consultation with various acharyas to see, because out of the 555 sutras, we don't have time to do all of them. So I'm going to select a few of them and focus on them. Which ones I focus on, I'm not yet sure of, but I'm getting to that point. I'm doing some homework. When we select a sutra, there chances are that we will be able to do Shankarabhasya itself, not just conceptual explanation. So that's kind of like where we are going with this. So with that, let us now look at the Shankarabhasya of the fourth sutra, Tattu Samanvaya. Okay, so let me draw your attention to these pages that I had sent to you which were printed from an excellent work from IIT Kanpur. Um, and so you have that in front of you. And so this is one, and I'm going to follow the Bhashya and then look at the explanation of the Bhashya from this book called the Ratna Prabha, which is in Hindi by Sri Bhole Baba. And this is an extremely very well done book. All the major acharyas just love this work, and so I will follow that. In the meantime, the English translation of the Shankarabhasya is available in the Gambhirananda's book that you have, and I will refer to it also, but I won't follow it sentence by sentence. So in fact, this will be a good homework. You can listen to, if you're interested, you can listen to the explanation of the Shankarabhasya, and then you can correspond to what Swami Gambhirananda has said. So I won't follow it sentence by sentence, but conceptually you can follow that as well. And so what we will do, if you can begin, if you look at these notes that I'd sent to you from IIT Kanpur, turn to page 9. So Katham Punaha. So here to page 9, this is where we're going to begin. In this Gambhirananda book, turn to page 20. Okay? Turn to page 20, which is this one. So it says topic 4, Upanishad renew, what is it? Upanishads reveal Brahman. That's the topic of the Tattu Samanvayat. And so that is the 4th topic. So that is given on page number 20. This is where we will begin. So one interesting thing in this notes from IIT Kanpur, the introduction to the 4th sutra is given at the end of the 3rd sutra. This is how it is. In fact, if you look at the main heading of this page number 9, it says Shastra Yonitvat, which is 113. It's the 3rd sutra. So they prefer to it. So there are some different ways of presenting the introduction. They present the introduction at the end of the 3rd sutra. Most of the scholars include the introduction in the beginning of the 4th sutra itself, which is both Gambhirananda as well as the Ratna Prabha book. And so, but doesn't matter, I'm just giving you the placement of it. So let us start. The first sentence is Katham Punaha Brahmanah Shastra Pramanakatvam. Katham Punaha Brahmanah Shastra Pramanakatvam. So he says, so the first this use of the language Katham Punaha is interesting. So Punaha means again. So there it means it's a kind of like a period and a new sentence. So he says, now therefore I don't understand. Katham, how? How do you say, now how do you say that Brahmanah Shastra Pramanakatvam? How do you say, because that's what Shastra Yonitvat, the 3rd sutra says, that the Brahman can be, is described and only known through Shastra. Shastra is the yoni whose yoni is Shastra. That is the Brahman, because the main topic is Brahman. Brahman means our reality of who we are. And so that reality of who we are can only be known by Shastra. And in fact, it is the main topic of the Shastra. So here the question is, how do you say that? Why do you... I don't understand how you can make that statement. Katham punaha brahmanah shastra pramanakatvam uchyate. He says, this is... it'll be a complete sentence. Katham punaha brahmanah shastra pramanakatvam uchyate. How do you say that? Yavata amnayasya kriyarthatvat anarthakyam tadarthanamiti kriyaparatvam shastrasya pradarshitam. So he says, I don't know why you can say that Brahman is the main topic of the Shastra, because it is well known that the Shastra is dealing with kriya paratvam, all to do with actions. This is what is called vidhi. Vidhi means what to do, how to perform various rituals. These are all not easily discernible by the human beings, because we can only understand things that we can see. But Shastra gives you an extraordinary revelation of doing yajnas that you don't know. And that's what the Shastra is doing. So this is his Kriyarthatvat. We've already seen this. This is the shloka that Jaimini Sutra had given. Kriyarthatvat anarthakyam tadarthanam. Anything other than Kriyaparatvam is anarthakyam. Anarthakyam means useless. Useless, to be discarded, has no meaning to it. So he says, if that is the case, how can it reveal Brahman? Because the revelation of the Brahman doesn't involve any action, and the Shastra is only involved with action. So it doesn't make any sense how you can say that Brahman is known to be through Upanishad. In fact, even in our prayers, we say that, we just said that. Yeah. So in verse number 6 we say, Apyayantu mama angani Vak pranas chakshuh shrotramatho balamindriyani cha sarvani sarvam brahma upanishadam. Upanishadam means that Upanishatat jatam. It is born out of the Upanishad alone. We say that. So he says, how do you say that? That doesn't make any sense. So here is Purva Paksha. The Purva Paksha is saying it. So again, Katham punaha brahmanah shastra pramanakatvam uchyate yavata amnayasya means to the Vedas. Vedas is also called amnaya. Amnayasya kriyarthatvat anarthakyam tadarthanamiti kriyaparatvam shastrasya pradarshitam. So he says that Shastra is all involved with action. This is well known, pradarshitam. It's not darshitam only, but prakarshena darshitam. Well known. It's very easy to understand. Ataha, next sentence, Ataha Vedantanam anarthakyam akriyarthatvat. So he says, therefore we can now conclude that Vedanta is useless. There is really no utility for it. Because, why is it? Because akriyarthatvat. Because it is not enjoined There is no vidhi. So when the Vedanta makes a Mahavakya statement, that tattu, so I am Atma Brahma, or just say that you are Brahman, it is not talking about any vidhi. It's just a plain statement. That doesn't fit with the Shastra. So that I don't understand that. I don't accept it. Then he says, okay, all right, there is another possibility that some statements may be connected with doing some upasana to devatas. So that's the next one. Kartru devatadi prakashanarthatvam prakashanarthatvena va kriya vidhi visheshatvam upasanadi kriya antara vidhanartham va. So he says, okay, there are two other possibilities that it could have. One is, it is connected. It has a connection to some kind of a vidhi. By itself it may not be vidhi, but it is connected to some vidhi. That's a possibility that you can have, but it is not really the main one. So there in Ratnaprabha makes it very easy to understand in Hindi. It says, I'll read in Hindi just one second. Athava. Athava means, va means or, either or. Athava. कर्ता देवता आदि का प्रकाशन करना वेदांतों का प्रयोजन है, इसलिए वेदांत क्रिया विधि वाक्यों के अंग हैं. Beautiful. So he makes it very clear. When you say connected, so connected means it is a limb. So even in the human body, for example, we have our main stem, which is really who our body is. Connected to the body are some limbs like hands. So sometimes you see it's very difficult to see that in some kind of a battle or a war, the hands are blown off. So the person's hands are blown off. Legs are even blown off. But the main stem remains. So this is what is called Anga Angi Bhava. The Angi is the one, Angin is the main stem, and Anga is the secondary connection to the main Anga. So he says, possibly, if you stretch your imagination, I can accept Vedanta to be an Anga of Kriya Paratvam or Devata Paratvam. Some kind of a yajna for devatas or some kriya, etc. So he says, so revising that, ataha vedantanam anarthakyam akriyarthatvat kartra devatadi prakashanarthatvena va kriya vidhi sheshatvam. Vidhi sheshatvam means vidhi angatvam. Upasanadi kriya antara vidhanartham va. Or you have some kind of a upasana that you are doing. Some prayer that you are doing. Aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi. You keep on repeating it and so on, and you feel a little better about it. But there is no real revelation per se. The next sentence now. Nahi parinishthita vastu swarupa pratipadanam sambhavati pratyakshadi vishayatvat parinishthita vastunaha tat pratipadane cha heya upadeya rahite purushartha abhavat. Beautiful sentence. He says, Parinishtata vastu. Parinishtata vastu means one which is already there. Already there. There's nothing, nothing is imported. And nothing is given up. Heya means to give up. Upadeya means to take up. So it is already there. It has nothing to do with removing it or obtaining it. So that also doesn't make any sense. What he's saying is, so in Hindi, for example, he says, Parinishthita means siddha. Siddha means already there. सिद्ध वस्तु का प्रतिपादन करना तो वेदांतों का प्रयोजन नहीं हो सकता, क्योंकि सिद्ध वस्तु प्रत्यक्षादि प्रमाणों का विषय है और उसका प्रतिपादन न हेय है न उपादेय है, अतः उसमें पुरुषार्थ अर्थ का अभाव है. So he says there is no sense in talking about something which is already there, because there is no action involved with it. That's basically what his argument is. The entire argument is that life should be meant for doing something. Here means you give up any thoughts that are not conducive. And upadaya means you take thoughts that are conducive. So this is all good. But here there is already established, he says, this is Brahman, I am Brahman, I am Brahman. What does it do? It doesn't do anything. That's what he's saying. And then he gave some examples. Ataha eva saha arodit iti evam adinam anarthakyam mabhut iti vidhina tu ekat vakya vastu Sutiyarthena vidhinam syuhu iti stavakatvena arthavatvam uktam. So, this is a difficult sentence. Let me see. Okay. So he says, so this gets into some technical aspects of how to interpret the various Shastra Vakyas, Veda Vakyas. So there it gives the saying that don't use silver as part of certain yajnas. So there is a vidhi involved, that you have to use certain kind of metals, not other kind of metals. And so he says if you use silver inappropriately, then there is the gods will have some tears. And so that is not the right thing to do. So he says there are all these complications and so on and so forth. There also Vedanta does not play a part. Because if you were to explain these various angas and side marks and so on, that I can understand. But Vedanta also doesn't do that. So that is the overall sense of it. I won't go into the details of it. And so I'll proceed further. I will read it but not explain it. Saha arodit iti evamadinam anarthakyam mabhut iti vidhinaha tu ekavakyatvat stutiyarthena vidhina syuhu iti stavakatvena anarthakyam uktam mantranam cha ishetva ityadinam kriya tat sadhana abhidhayakatvena karma samavayittam uktam. I won't go into the details of all of that. You can read the English translation of it. Let me go to the next one. Ataha na kvachidapi vedanta vakyanam vidhi samsparshalmantarena arthavatta drishta upapannava. So he concludes his Purvapaksha, his objection to saying that you can see Brahman from the Vedas. He says, no, it's not possible. So therefore, ataha means therefore, na kvachidabi, nowhere from the Veda Vakyanam, vidhi samsparsha antarena arthavatta drishta. Other than vidhi vakyas, there is nothing that should be really looked into because it is useless. Drishta, it is not seen. Upapannava, neither is it seen nor is it reasonable. If it was reasonable, then it would have said it, but they don't say it, and so not really useful at all. Nacha parinishtite vastu swarupe vidhi sambhavati. So here one I think I would do is, remember we had gone through this conceptually. So Adi Shankara had taken up 3 different Purvapakshis. Remember that? So one was the Bhatta Mata. The second one was Prabharaka. And the third one was Vrittikara. Right? Those are the 3 Purvapakshas that he had taken. The first 2 that were Bhatta and Prabhakara, these 2 matas, which are called Bhatta Mata and Prabharaka Mata, were saying that Brahman is not the main topic of Vedas. It's not even there at all. Then, a Vrittikara Mata was presented. And the Vrittikara Mata said, no, I won't go that far. I won't go so far as to say that Brahman is the topic of Vedas. Because it is the topic of the Vedas. But, this is what the Vrittikara says. And so Adi Shankara had dealt with the first 2 in a short form, but this third one was a little bit more subtle. And so he devoted most of the time in talking about Vrittikara. And I'll tell you when that starts in a minute. Right now we are dealing with Prabhakara and Bhatta. This is what they are saying, that there is absolutely no possibility of Vedas discussing Brahman because it is not Kriya Paratvam. This is what the first 2 are saying. Okay, so I just wanted to correlate to where the concepts are. So anyway, going back to it, ataha na kvachidapi vedavakyanam vidhi samsparsha antarena. Vidhi samsparsha antarena means other than touching a vidhi. You could have an anga, just like when you are, I think that's some examples will come, like you are doing yajnas and you are offering some ahuti. So as an ahuti you can say, yes, this is the main yajna, which is the anga, which is the angi, and the ahuti that is given in the fire is a kind of like a separate portion of it. That I can understand. You are sort of serving the main thing, but you're not the main topic of it. This is what he's saying. Nacha parinishtite vastu swarupe vidhihi sambhavati. he goes on with his arguments and he says that there is no vidhi for something which is already siddha vastu. Parinishthite vastu swarupe vidhi na sambhavati. Kriya vishayatvad vidhehe tasmat karma apekshitat kartrudevatadi swarupa prakashanena kriya vidhi sheshatvam vedantana. And so he says exactly the same argument he's just repeating now, summarizing it in saying, I don't accept Vedanta as the central theme of Vedas. Atha prakaranaantara bhayat na etat abhyupigamyate tathapi swavakyagata upasanadi karma paratvam tasmat na brahmanah shastra yonitvam. So he says that you are just you are afraid of really tackling the main topic, which is the kriya paratvam, and I don't accept it. Therefore, he concludes Brahmanah Shastra Yonitvam iti. So he gives his argument and he says, therefore, now it is very clear, I have already explained all the reasons for it, therefore it is not the main topic. Prapte, this being the case, uchyate. So this is how the connection is. I think if you remember in the last class we had talked about it, that there is always a connection between one sutra and the other. So the question is, why do you have the Tattu Samanvayat? Do you have Tattu Samanvayat because there are doubts and objections about the Shastra Yonitvam. So that's what it is. So that being the case, now the answer by Vyasacharya begins with the fourth sutra. So now let's look at it. So now we can go to page number 11, which is the beginning of Tattu Samanvayat. So he starts with saying, Tu Shabdaha Purvapaksha Vyavrityarthaha. We have already seen that when we were doing the conceptual. He says the word tu is an important one because it is to do khandana. Khandana means to completely negate the Purvapaksha. All these crazy things that they are saying, that the Vedas are not talking about Atma, they are talking about some Kriya. What are you talking about? You don't just get real with it. So, tu shabdaha purvapaksha vyavrityartha. So then it says, tat brahma sarvajnaha sarvashaktihi jagat utpatti sthiti laya karanam vedanta shastrat avagamyate. So this is a very important statement. What it says, that how can you know that the entire Jagat means whatever would we see in our life, whatever anybody can see in any life, because that's exactly what this whole beauty is, that the same Brahman, which, same thing with the human being. Each human being goes through the fact where you have nothing going on when you are sleeping. Nothing. Deep sleep. There is no expression, there is no role playing, no transactions, nothing. things can be happening, but you are out of it. So this would be something which is not really, it is like something which is non-expressed. It is there, but non-expressed. Then when you wake up, a play starts. Then, who am I? What am I supposed to do today? What day of the week is it? What time is it? All kinds of things start happening. Then you start getting ready, going to the bathroom, taking a shower, eating, all kinds of expressions, then talking to people, calling someone, looking at all expressions happen. So Jagat also is really, the whole thing is nothing but an expression. Now, the statement says that all these actions in the world, all the experiences, you can say, better word for actions is all the experiences of the world come out from Brahman, play within Brahman, and go back to Brahman. You get a sample of that within yourself. Your entire life dissolves in you and expresses in you again and again. This is the thing, is the night and day and the sleep and waking is not just, we should really wonder about it. How is this done? It is all part of a sample, if you may, of the real stuff. So a sample of the real stuff means that you can see that this happens to you as an individual. And it happens to all the individuals. It's not like only it happens to some other people. This is the very basic part of individuality. What is the basic part? The fact that there is an unmanifestation and manifestation. And the unmanifestation is not a death of the manifestation. It is a dissolving of the manifestation. That's all. There is a continuous process. And in fact, even when you manifested as a baby in this life for the first time, that also is a manifestation of all the dissolved things in the previous life. So it is a continuous, it's a continuum. So that is there as a sample for the individual. But the entire Jagat also is an expression within Brahman alone, Paramatma alone. Your sample is as a Jivatma, but the entire thing is an expression of the Paramatma. This fact cannot be known except the assertions of the Vedas. And it's very clear. People don't accept it. Supposing if you go to the office and you talk to, and especially it doesn't matter whether you're in India or in the US. In India, if you go to an office and people are also have studied something, then they'll say, oh yeah, I've heard about that. But certainly in the US and the Western world, if you go to the office and say, by the way, my teacher was telling me that this whole expression is born out of Brahman. He said, what? What are you talking about? Have you had something to drink today or what? Nobody accepts it. This is a complete secret. What can we do? So the revelation of the very reality of the world is only possible through Shastra. Shastra means a teaching of the Vedas. Not just Vedanta, but the entire Vedas. And this is what this sentence is saying. So he says, Tu Shabda Purva Paksha Vyavritti Arthaha. Then he says, then what? Tat Brahma. So Tat comes from Tat tu Samanvayat. So Tat means Brahman, the reality. So that's this Sarvanama. This is the pronoun. The noun is Brahma, but pronoun is Tat, that. That Brahma, which is Sarvagyam, Sarvashaktimatvam, Jagat Utpatti Sthiti Laya Karanam, Vedanta Shastrat Avagamyate. This can only be known through Vedanta Shastra. Katham Samanvayat. He says, how? Because it is Samyak Anyatvat. Anvayat, sorry, not Anyatvat. Samyak Anvayat. Anvaya means a logical connection, derivation. It's called Anvaya. You know, sometimes you have these poetic sentences, especially in Sanskritam. As you know, Sanskritam is a very beautiful language. Why? Because there the words and the meaning of the words does not depend upon the placement in a sentence. Right? So, for example, so unlike in English and in Hindi also the same thing, because it is easier. So you have the word Rama. Now the word, so you can say Lakshmana did namaskara to Rama. This is what one needs to explain. Lakshmana, his younger brother, did namaskara to his older brother Rama. Okay? Now how will we do that in English? In English you will say Lakshman did namaste to Rama. This is how you will say that. You cannot say Rama did namaste to Lakshman. Why? Because the subject has to come first and the object has to come later. Even in Hindi the same thing is there. You can say Lakshman ne Ram ko namaste ki. But in Sanskrit it is not there. Why? Because you can designate a subjective component of Rama as Ramaha and an objective component of Rama as Ramam. This being the case, you can vectorize it anywhere. So you can say, normally you can say Lakshmanaha Ramam Namaskritam. Namaskritaha actually. You can say Namaskrita. So Lakshmanaha Ramam Namaskritaha. Okay? But you can also say Ramam Lakshmanaha Namaskritaha. So you can put the words anywhere in the sentence. Doesn't matter. Why? Because you've already vectorized Rama to become an object, which is Ramam. and you have specified the vectorization of Lakshmana as a subject. And so there you can put it anywhere. This is why the the thinking of sentences in Sanskritam is more difficult. This is what is called Anvaya. Anvaya means to sort it out in a manner that we can think. Because the beauty of Sanskritam is that it is difficult because you now have all these vectorizations of the word and you can do it anywhere in the sentence. But the way we think is that you have to think about a subject first, then the object later. And so you have to rearrange the words in your mind. This is called Anvaya. And Samanvaya means Samyak Anvaya. Means that you can easily do that in poetic sentence. It is not that big a deal. But when you have lots of different topics with lots of arguments and possibilities, then to sort it all out and make a little logical sense out of it is not that easy. So you need some, not just Anvaya. You need Samyak Anvaya. It's called Samanvaya. So he says, Katham, how can you make a statement? Tad Brahma Sarvagyam Sarvashakti Jagat Utpatti Sthiti Laya Karanam Vedanta Shastrat Avagamyate. Katham Samanvayat. Means when you say it, it means logical sense. That's the only way it will happen. So then he explains it now. Sarveshu hi Vedanteshu Vakyani Tatparyena Etasya Arthasya Pradipatakattvena Saman Anugatani. Some Anugatani. So therefore he says that if you were to examine the true import of all sentences in Vedanta, this is their main tatparya. This is what they all explain consistently. There is no... Consistently means there's no doubt. It's not as though you're saying, oh, I think they might say this, because here it says something else, here it says something. If it says something else, then it has to be properly understood that it is really saying the same thing. Like, for example, there are contradictory statements, bigger than the biggest and smaller than the smallest. Faster than the thought and slower than, so you can have all kinds of contradictions. So those contradictions are not a mistake. They have to be understood properly. Like, for example, bigger than the biggest means that if you have the big iceberg that has broken off from Antarctica because of the global warming, huge one. And then you have a small drop of the ocean water. So you can say that the water is bigger than the Antarctica piece of ice that has broken off, and smaller than it's the same. That means it is beyond the bigness and smallness, it is the very content. So that kind of, you have to do samanvaya. That may be possible. But otherwise, the entire Vedanta has absolutely no inconsistency whatsoever. So that's why he says, Sarveshu hi Vedanteshu Vakyani Tatparyaihi Etat Tasya Arthasya Pradipatakattvena Sam Anugatani. Pratipadakatvena means by teaching, by showing, by definitely revealing. That's Pratipadakatvena Samagutani. And he then starts examples. He says, Sadeva Saumya Idamagra Asit Ekam Eva Advitiyam Atma Va Idamekam Eva Agre Asit Tadetad Brahma Apurvam Manaha Apurvam Anaparam Anantaram Abbahyam Ayamatma Brahma Sarva Anubhuhu Brahma Eva Idam Amritam Purastat Ityadini. How can he, so he says that as an example, that there was only the Paramatma without any differentiation. Just like you and I, when you are deep asleep, there are no thoughts, there are no forms. I alone am. So similarly here he says, the entire Shastra talks about Sadeva Saumya Idamagra Asit. Sadeva Asit. So just the beingness without the exact manifestation of the beingness. It is just I am. That is how it was. And then Ekam Eva Advitiyam Atma, all these examples are given. And he says that it is very clear that there is no inconsistency. They all have the same tatparya. That's what it says. So then he says, Nacha tad gatanam padanam brahma sarupa vishaye nishchite samanvaye avagamyamane arthantara kalpana yukta shrutahani ashruta kalpana prasangat. He says that being the case, being what case? Tat gatanam padanam brahma swarupa vishaye nishchite samanvaye. That this being the main topic in all of the Vedanta Vakyas and very consistent of them, this being known, arthantara kalpana na yukta. So come out with some kind of a alternative theory that no, I don't think that makes sense. This is not yukta, means that it is beyond reason, unreasonable. And so what that will do is shrutahani, what is being said is unaccepted and what is not being said is accepted. Does it make any sense? Follow what the Shruti is saying. So that's what he says. Shrutahani atashruta kalpana. Kalpana means just having come up with your own ideas and so on and so forth. Aparsangat. There is no reason to do so. Nacha teshanam kartra devatadi swarupa pratipadana parata avasiyate tat kena kampashyet ityadi kriya karaka phala nirakarana shrute. So he says that there are in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and other, that once you know that there is an understanding of Advaita. So Advaita means that there is only one reality and the appearance of non-reality is not on the same level. It is just like you are looking at your reflection in the mirror. There are not two people. if you look at them as two people, that means there is something wrong with you. You've had too much to drink. But that is not reality. You cannot say, I am talking to that person and that person is talking back to me. So this is where in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says that once you have Ekatvam understood, then who does what to what, it doesn't make any sense. I think one of our students, Madhu Grandhi, has recently given a quote from Ramana Maharshi, but somebody asked him, how should I treat others? What is the best way to treat others? And Ramana Maharshi, he says, there are no others. So the question of treating anybody else does not arise at all. There's only one person, which is Brahman, which is you. As long as you don't understand it, you can talk to someone, but once you do, tat kena kam pashyet iti kriyakaraka phala nirakarana shrute. So in Shruti, they don't go into kriya and how one does it or anything, because the whole idea is there is no second person. So he says, nacha tesham kartra devata adi swarupa pratipadana parata avasiyate tat kena kam pashyet ityadi kriyakaraka phala nirakaranam shrutehe. Then he goes on further. Nacha parinishthita vastu swarupatve api pratyakshadi vishayatvam brahmanah tattvamasi iti vak Brahma Atma Bhavasya Shastra Mantarena Anavagamyam Anavagamyamanatvat. Let me see how well best to explain this. Nacha parinishthita vastu. Yeah. So he says, nacha parinishthita vastu swarupatvepi pratyakshadi vishayatvam brahmanah tattvamasi iti vak iti brahma atma bhavasya shastra mantarena anavagamyatmanatvat. Okay, yeah. So he says that even though it is a parinishthita vastu, Atma is a siddha vastu. Our reality is Satyam Jnanam Anantam, which doesn't change. It looks like it is sadhya. It has to be established, but it should be seen to be siddha. It is already established. There is nothing more that you need to do other than to see that it is a siddha vastu. And to see this is a siddha vastu, you cannot figure that out by your normal pratyakshadi vishaya. Just like you figure out something else, that what kind of a fruit is this? Is this what kind of a book is this? So use your eyes, your hands, your mind to figure that out. This you cannot do. This you cannot do because it is not a pratyaksha vastu. It is the one which is the very basis of all the pratyaksha. So therefore, even though it is a siddha vastu, other than Shastra, no other means of knowledge are going to be useful. This is what it is saying. So let's read, with that explanation, let's read it one more time. Nacha parinishthita vastu swarupepi. Even though that this swarupa of Atma is as a parinishthita vastu, siddha vastu. Parinishthita, as we saw earlier, is called siddha, already there. Pratyakshadi vishayatvam brahmanah tattvamasi iti brahmatma bhavasya shastramantarena anavagamyamanatvat. Other than Shastra that says the Mahavakya, you are that, it is not possible to know anything. Not possible. So, then the next one is Yattu Heya Upadeya Rahitatvat Upadesha Anarthakyamiti Naisha Doshaha Heya Upadeya Shunya Brahma Atmata Avagamat Eva Sarva Klesha Prahanat Purusha Siddhi. So he says, however, you say that it is not a subject of Heya Upadeya. That's what your objection was. That only the Shastra should be involved in saying things that should be picked up or removed. And here, if it is a Siddha Vastu, then it cannot be given up or to be obtained. Therefore, it doesn't make sense. This was the dosha you were talking about. He says that dosha doesn't apply. Yattu heya upadeya rahitatvad upadesha anarthakyam iti na esha doshaha. Why is it not a dosha? Heya upadeya shunya brahma atmata avagamat eva sarva klesha prahanat purushartha siddhe. So therefore he says, let me see the exact words that he used to explain this. Yes. So he says that this is not a valid objection because only by understanding that Brahma is above something which is to be given up and something to be acquired. It is not involved with the transactions of life. It simply acts as a sakshi towards explaining that what is going on is not in it. Like, for example, you have lots of different things going on in the reflection. So the understanding is that it has nothing to do with you. It's only going on with reflections. So therefore, taking up and removing, etc., is not part of Brahman. Only when you understand that there will be a cessation of problems of life. And that's what the Vakya is saying. So let me read it one more time. He says, Yattu. However, the one objection that you have, which is Heya Upadeya Rahitatvat Upadesha Anarthakyam. See what it says? It's interesting. He says, you are saying that Shastra can only be involved in heya anupadeya. As we have said earlier, that all the one's asura bhava has to be given up and deva bhava has to be obtained. So asura bhava means that I am just a limited being and I'm just going to enjoy my life and so on and so forth. That needs to be negated. And deva bhavam here would mean that I am really already endowed with a sense of freedom. And so that is to be upadeya. So he says that the Shastra should only be concerned with heya and upadeya. And so therefore any other thing that other than that is useless. This is a dosha which I don't accept. Why don't I accept it? Because instead of being involved in heya and upadeya all your life, it has to be done to a certain extent. But ultimately you have to understand that the Atma is neither heya nor upadeya. Why it is involved in both of them? It has a sakshi. And so that is really the main thing that you do. And only when you understand that, there will be a real cessation of klesha in your life. That's what this sentence is saying. I'll repeat it one more time, but that's the point it's making. That the heya unupadeya, all the actions of life, I must be good, I must remove papas from my life, I must get some more punyas, etc., can only help you up to so much. It is a never-ending process. It's not going to give you the final delivery. You just, main thing you have to understand is that there is something funny going on. I am beyond both heya and upadeya. If you do that, then sarva klesha prahana purushartha siddhi becomes. Then you become totally oblivious of all the problems. So that will be, I'll end the class with this, just this one explanation. Yattu heya upadeya rahitatvat upadesha anarthakyam, that it is uselessness, na esha dosha. This is not a defect that I am willing to accept. Why? Because heya upadeya shunya brahma atmata avagamad eva, that the shunya means that it is devoid of heya upadeya. That is the brahma atmata. Then by knowing that alone, sarva klesha prahanarthat purushartha siddhe. That is really the thing to understand. That is what one has to really grasp. And so it is very relevant for the Shruti to point that out. So you cannot give me an example that because it is not talking about heya and upadeya, it is useless. No. So all right, I think we'll have to stop given the time. I was hoping that I would do more than that this day, but I think explaining the Sanskritam and the concepts takes more time. So I think that what I will do, I wanted to go up to, so right now we are still at the Prabhakara and Bhattamata. We haven't come to the Vrittikara. So what I want to do is to go up to the Vrittikara, which will take me another class. And having gone up to Vrittikara, we will do a couple of sentences Because after that it gets very detailed. I may not do that. In fact, I won't do that. So at least this will be for another class. Then we will do a summary of all the four and then call it a day and then see what we want to do next. So that's how the plan is. So I would imagine that for some of you that were not that interested in this Sanskritam, this may not be as enjoyable to you. I recognize that. But I took the responsibility of explaining Shankarabhasya to some of you that do know Sanskrit. So I have to fulfill my duty. And so I will continue to do that for the next few classes before we go into a more conceptual understanding. Okay? So with that, let me finish the prayers and then see if you have any questions. Om Rahu Grasta Divankarendu Sadrisho Maya Samachadhanat Sanmatra Karanopasamharanato Yo Bhut Sushuptaf Puman Pragaswapsamiti Prabodha Samaye Yah Pitya Bhigyayate Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Balyadishwapi Jagradadishu Tatha Sarva Swavasthaswapi Vyavritta Svanuvartamanamaham Ityantaspurantam Sada Swatmanam Prakati Karoti Bhajatam Yo Mudraya Bhadraya Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Vishwam Pashyati Karya Karanataya Swaswami Sambandhatataha Shishyacharya Tathaiva Pitraputradyatmana Bhedataha Swapne Jagrati Vaya Esha Purusho Maya Paribhramitaha Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Bhurambhamsya Nalo Nilo Ambar Maharnartho Himamshuh Puman Ityabhati Characharatmakamidam Yasyaiva Murtyashtakam Nanyat Kinchana Vidyate Vimrashatam Yasmat Parasmat Vibhoho Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Sarvatmatvamiti Sputikritamidam Yasmadamushmin Stave Tenasya Shravanat Tadarthamananat Dhyanat Sankirtanat Sarvatmatvamahavibhuti Sahitam Syadishwaratvam Swataha Siddhyetat Punarashtadha Parinatam Chaishwaryam Avyahatam Ashubhani Nirachaste Tanoti Shubhasantatim Smriti Matrena Yat Pumsam Brahmatan Mangalam Param Ati Kalyana Rupatvat Nitya Kalyana Samshrayat Smartranam Varadatvat Cha Brahmatan Mangalam Viduhu Omkaraschatha Shabdascha Dvavetau Brahmanah Pura Kantham Bhitva Viniryatau Tasman Mangilakau Bhau Omata 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 Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. All right, let's see. Nice, good to see you all. Wonderful. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving holiday. Good to be back. And I would continue with this Shankarabhasya commentary of the fourth sutra for one more class. And hopefully, I'm also not that familiar with just doing it that way. So if it seems a little jerky, please forgive me. It is much better to teach something which is just conceptual rather than to do the anvaya of the sentences and so on. Because I don't do that very often now. I used to. So forgive me if it looks a little jerky at times. But I think this book on Bhole Baba is very useful whenever there is some doubt about exactly what the. That's why I refer to it in my study of that. So I'll continue to do that one more class, and after that I think we'll go back to the more normal way of teaching. Okay, so that's the plan, and I look forward to completing this. And then we'll decide to do how many more sutras are necessary and how best to do that. So that is probably the beginning of 2022. We will make a decision on that. So in the meantime, good to see you all, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Om.